Most of what we have in life right now is the result of one thing: your decisions. Every choice you've made, big or small, stacked up to get you here, which means your future depends on making better ones. Now, for many years, I didn't have a proper framework for making decisions. I went with my gut, followed emotions, or simply copied what others were doing. And sometimes I regretted it later. That changed when I came across a video by Sam Ovens, an entrepreneur. And it gave me a structure I could actually follow, and it completely shifted how I decided, or how I decide in general. And by the way, if you haven't watched Sam's old YouTube videos, go find them. Just search for Sam Ovens. They are gold. And this episode is my take on what I learned from one of those videos, plus my own spin. Now, today I want to share a framework I've been using to make better decisions. And it has three parts. Part number one is reduce the load. Second part, think critically. And third, apply mental models. And I'm gonna explain each of those parts. And if you stay till the end, you will get my 4-step decision-making framework to make a good decision today. So, a warm welcome to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where we talk about high performance and business. My name is Nicola, and I currently work in software sales. Now, before we talk about making better decisions, let's define what a decision actually is. A decision is the moment you commit to one path and eliminate all others. In behavioral terms, it's the act of closing the loop in your mind so you stop debating and start acting. No more waiting, no more maybe. You cut off alternatives and place your chips on one option. So you say yes to something, no to something else. And this is why decisions feel heavy. Every yes is also 100 silent no's to something else. And this is why poor decision making keeps people stuck. They either never commit or they commit for the wrong reasons because of emotions, pressure, fear, or copying others. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about how to make better decisions. Now, as we understand what a decision actually is. And the first part to it is reduce the load. So, good decisions require energy. And energy is finite. We only have so much energy to deploy on a given day. And if you burn it on trivial choices, for instance, on questions like, what should I wear today? Or what should I eat for lunch? You won't have much left for the important ones. It drains a lot of your energy resources. So to reduce the number of decisions you have to make, I want to give you 5 points you can apply today or in the following days. The first one is making fewer decisions. In other words, to cut out activities and commitments that aren't essential. Give you an example. If you join 3 clubs, 3 sports, and say yes to every social invite, you will be drained to make good work or life choices. So to drop most of them can help to make fewer decisions. The second thing is sacrifice strategically. So saying no more often than yes, even to things you like, so you can win the bigger game. And the underlying presumption here is we are optimizing for big success. This is simply my observation that ultra successful people have implemented in their life. So they say no to a lot of different things, especially when they are starting out, and say yes, or they do a big commitment to the major thing they want to optimize for. In some cases, that could be their business or building up their business. To give you an example, how that can look like in practice, passing on weekend parties to get up early and work on your business. So you say no to going out on parties, you say yes to waking up early and working on your business. And a very practical framework I came across is the 5-second no, which is a mental model from, I think it comes from Charlie Munger, who is the former business partner of Warren Buffett. But I picked it up from Rolf Dobelli, who is a Swiss author. He has written a great book called The Art of the Good Life. And this is how it works. Every moment you're asked to do something, you already know you don't want to do it. So if you get asked for something and you already have in your mind, oh, I don't actually want to do it, you say no immediately within about 5 seconds. And this prevents you from hesitating, overthinking, or letting the other person talk you into it. Why is this important? Because there are many small requests throughout the day, perhaps, especially if you're at work or somewhere else, or you get asked to, hey, let's do here an activity or here. And sometimes you already know in your mind you don't actually want to do it, but you are maybe too scared to say no. But this framework gives you 5 seconds and you need to come up with a decision. And if it's not a hell yes, so a big yes, you think, wow, that's amazing, you say no in most cases. And in the first place, this might sound a little bit harsh, or it feels harsh. But later on, your life, it gives so much peace or adds so much peace to your life because it frees up time to focus on the things that truly matter. It could be your family, it could be your business, it could be your work or career. So that was the second point, sacrifice strategically. The third thing is limit surface area. Reduce how many channels people can reach you on, how many notifications you get, and how many random obligations can land on your lap. What is here an example? For instance, deleting WhatsApp and only checking one email inbox. That's a more extreme approach. But you get the gist. You make sure that people can get you only through few channels. Sam Ovens is renowned for being very hard to reach. I think he's only using one Slack channel. And a lot of people can only reach him through Slack. He don't have WhatsApp, I think. But I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that changed. But he makes it very hard. But it helps him to knowing that he has only one channel where people can reach him and not 1,000 inboxes, because some people communicate, and sometimes I also fall into that tendency, but I try to avoid that, to use Instagram inbox, WhatsApp inbox, 5 different email inboxes, but then realizing that how can I declutter that and just have the most essential ones? This adds so much peace to life because you don't have to check when you're going through a shallow work session and answering all the messages through 10 different inboxes. So again, less mental clutter, more space for good decisions. So you limit surface area. The fourth one is make one decision that removes many future ones. That's a great one. So for instance, you can wear a set uniform. You can automate meals or set fixed routines. So with a set uniform, I simply mean you wear the same thing every day. Like for instance, Steve Jobs wore the same black turtleneck and jeans daily, so he never had to think about clothes. In terms of automate meals, give you a personal example. One of my standard meals right now is eating for lunch 6 eggs, roughly 200 grams of blueberries, sometimes 250 grams, some meat next to it, maybe avocado. Or another meal could be, in my case, rice, chicken, broccoli. Pretty simple, but it works and it's healthy, or at least I think it's healthy and I feel great, and it's standardized. I don't need to think too much about it. And I can still leave room for spontaneity, of course, maybe once, twice, 3 times a week when I go to eat with someone something, for sure. But most of the time, it makes life simpler. And also fixed routines, I just mentioned, a great thing, pretty obvious. I think James Clear wrote an entire book about it, Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's a great one. The last one is simplify your personal life. So keep lifestyle complexity low so you have capacity for your main thing. A quick story here. You have probably heard of Mike Tyson. And what happened in his case is the more successful he became, let's start like this. He started out as a pretty hard working boxer. He trained very hard to become the best. And then after a certain period, he was at the top. And then he started to add complexities to his life. He started buying expensive cars, supercars, mansions, big houses, tigers, lions, whatever. And life became more complex. And he started to lose the focus because now he had a pretty complex lifestyle to live up to. So he became less successful. And I think later on again, he realized and changed a few stuff, I think. But that happened also in other cases. Some basketball players, they had a pretty similar instance. They became successful, added complexity, and their quality of playing the actual game that made them successful in the first place started to suffer. So another example could also be if you run a demanding business, don't also buy a second home that needs constant maintenance. Pretty simple, but I think simplifying your personal life can be a great one. Like living in a small, simple apartment, don't owning so many things. Although there can be beautiful value to that, of course, and or dressing nice clothes and putting in some effort could also be nice. I'm not denying that, but it's just my thoughts on it, what I like in my life right now, and that could change, of course, later on. And maybe I will update you as I progress. So that is the first part, reduce the load. So this isn't about being rigid. This is about saving your best energy for the decisions that actually change your life. And those are just some inputs, some ideas that can look a little bit different in your life. And you need to trade off what you're willing to sacrifice and what not. Do you want to live or be so extreme and to eat the same thing all the time? Maybe yes, maybe not. But actually, it's not that extreme because most of us have 4 or 5-ish standard meals we eat most of the time. Or when it comes to clothes, I have a pretty small wardrobe right now. It's pretty simple, actually. It's not that extreme, I would say, but makes life simpler. Okay. Now, the second part I mentioned before is think critically. That's the next big thing in order to make a good decision. Now, once you have the space to think, so what we just did is we decluttered our life. We made it simpler. We routinized it. Once you have the space to think, stop defaulting to what everyone else is doing. The crowd isn't always wrong, but it's rarely optimal for you. And Alex Hormozi, entrepreneur, he has a great quote. He said, "How to stay poor. Do what everyone else is doing." There's a reason why certain people are at a certain point, because they are doing the same things everybody else is doing. They're like, why are so many people obese? Because they are doing what a lot of people are doing. They're eating junk food. They are not eating very healthily. And there are some exceptions, blah, blah, blah. But now, for the sake of this, they're doing what everybody else is doing. And it's interesting, if you just sleep 8 hours per night at the same time, you eat a proper diet, and you work out in the gym, and you're not obese, by simply doing those things, you're already way above average. Interesting. And also, if there was a big meta indicator that you're doing the right thing, doing what everyone isn't doing is already probably the biggest signal or the biggest indicator that you're doing the right thing. In other words, if everybody is running left and you're running right, sometimes that can be an indicator that you're doing the right thing. And with that, I mean, there is actually a meme out there where you see an entire crowd running in one direction, and the other person says something like, I will prove you all wrong. I'm right, and runs in the other direction. And sometimes that can be the case. Maybe you're wrong 99% of the time, but you just need to be for 1% right. And there you will have the big return. So the main message, think critically. And I will break that down into 3 components. The first one is you do your own analysis. So break situations down into parts, keep what's valuable, and discard the rest. And who's very good at that? Elon Musk, at least from my perspective. He talked in the past about reasoning from first principles. Now, what does that mean? Reasoning from first principles means breaking a problem down to its most basic truths and building your solution from there instead of relying on assumptions or copying what others do. So, example, if a coffee at a cafe costs $10, now let's say $4 every day. First principle says coffee beans at home cost pennies, so why not brew it yourself and save thousands a year? Or another example could be, instead of a $30,000 wedding with 200 guests, you have a small mountain ceremony and an amazing photographer. So you ask yourself, those things everybody else is doing, do I actually need to do that? Maybe I have a good reason to deviate from that. And fair enough, in most cases, that's just my humble opinion, doing what everybody else is doing in some instances, and I'm not conflicting my argument before, I will explain that. If you're, I'll give you an example, having children, getting married, you should do that as long as you don't have you do that normally only if you have a very good alternative why you should deviate from that. But sometimes you need to deviate, and especially if you want to achieve exceptional results. And again, that's just my humble observation here. So coming back to the wedding example, instead of a big wedding, you ask, like your wife and you ask yourself, why do I need to do a big wedding? Why not just inviting my closest family, few friends, we rent something small, and we do a beautiful, cozy, small wedding? Why do we need the conventional norms? Why do we need to spend so much money? So the core message is just certain things that everybody else is doing, you can question and say, do we need to actually do it like this? Do I need to live up to those social obligations? No, maybe not. Maybe I can do something different about it. So that is reasoning from first principle. Do your own analysis and come up with your own conclusion. And it's hard because it requires you to think, but maybe something worth pursuing. The second component to thinking critically is know your core principles. So you decide upfront what you value most so you have a filter for decisions, because you need some guiding principles that you can use on a daily basis to make decisions. Now, in my example, what I've done is I created a Google Doc, a horizontal Google Doc, a one-pager with my vision, mission, problem statement, and core values or principles. And I had a period where I watch it every day. Now a little bit less now. I watch it every few weeks. And what's written there is pretty simple. The problem I want to avoid in my life, or the problems, my mission right now that guides me every day, and the big vision where I want to go very long-term wise. And my top 3 core principles or values. And beneath of that, some guiding rules that help me to have clarity throughout my weeks, months, and years. Because life is so much easier if you know, okay, what is important to me? Maybe honesty, maybe discipline, maybe focus, whatever it might be. And based on that, you come up with you make the proper choices. So, give you an example. If health is a core value, you will say no to a job that doubles your salary but destroys your sleep. something else is important to you, you act accordingly. So know your core principles. And the last one to thinking critically is spot decision patterns. So you learn from history. You notice which patterns end well. For instance, simple lifestyle, frugality, or long-term thinking, and which patterns end badly. Overcomplication, for instance, or extravagant spending. Like in Warren Buffett's example, Warren Buffett's modest house versus athletes who go bankrupt buying mansions and sport cars. Buzzword Mike Tyson. So, that is everything to think critically. And thinking critically isn't about being contrarian for the sake of it. It's about making choices aligned with your values, your goals, and your reality. So now we decluttered our lives. We are thinking critically. We are making our own analysis. And lastly, part 3 is we apply mental models. So mental models are shortcuts for thinking, distilled patterns you can apply across different situations. And here are a few powerful ones that served me well. The first one is you define your goal. In other words, your North Star. And because you can't judge a decision without knowing where you're trying to go. Example, if your goal is financial independence, a decision to take on debt for a luxury car is obviously wrong. Now, to make this very practical, in order to come up with a life vision or your North Star, a good point to start is buying Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's writing program, Self-Authoring Suite. I did it myself, most of it, and it's a super, super helpful writing program. I did the entire future authoring and present authoring, or a big part of it, and I can tell you guys, I sat there for rough, and maybe quick context, it's just a writing program that guides you through figuring out what's your life vision, what are your present strengths and weaknesses, and some path things you need to process. And it guides you through that entire process. And I recommend doing that. First, I did it myself, sat there for more than a month, almost every day or a lot of days, first 1 or 2 hours in the morning. And it gave me so much clarity and reduced so much anxiety because I knew after writing for an hour or two where I want to go, or it gave me more and more clarity where I want to go. And I went through that writing program, and what I then did as an answer to this program was creating this one-pager, which is a distilled version of my life vision, where I wrote down my problem statement, what I want to avoid. Like with every business you start, you want to solve problems, so you need a problem to solve. You want a vision, a very, very long-term vision, obviously, that can provide you with energy throughout your entire life, and then a practical mission that helps you right now in the day-to-day work, what you want to do, and where you want to go. So that's the first thing. You define your goal, your North Star. Then the next thing is you think long-term. You extend your time horizon. So 10 years from now, what choices would you be glad you made? And that's a very important point. I've seen very successful people in different domains that think very long-term wise. I remember Alex Hormozi, when he first started out with his YouTube channel, he hired a guy and he told him, like, I'm going to do this for the next, I think it was 10 years. And then I will reassess if I want to continue doing that. And the guy who got hired or worked with him I've never heard someone telling me that. Everybody wants to be successful tomorrow or within a year. You want to do that for 10 years. And I just loved that. And then I thought, okay, again, with this podcast here, I'm now 5 years, 5 years and 5 months in. I'm still starting out. I have so much to learn. That's the point. And I just think if I do that for 10 more years, I believe I can become a little bit better and build up a reasonable audience. It takes time, and that's fine. Thinking long term. It's the same with investing. $500 a month for a decade versus spending it on restaurants. Long-term thinking, every month putting something in, and there's no investment advice, in an ETF that pays you dividends or gives you a proper return, versus like short-term thinking, impulsive spending. And I'm not saying I'm a saint or an angel. That's not what I'm saying here. I also fall sometimes into the trap of impulsive spending. But it's always a good reminder to think, oh, that's what's the ideal state. Third component, part to applying mental models, or another mental model, is second order consequences. I very much love that. Now, what is a second order consequence? So you ask, and then what? And then what? And then what? Don't just think about the immediate result, consider the ripple effects. So I'll give you an example to make it clear. Taking a high-stress job for money will lead to burnout. That's the first consequence. Second consequence is worse health. Third consequence is worse quality of life. So you always think, okay, if I make this decision, that's the first order consequence. That's the second order consequence, third order consequence, and so on and so forth. The same with good habits. If I work out today, first order consequence is I will feel sore. I will be sore. Feels terrible. But second order consequence, I sleep better. Third order consequence, after a week I have more energy. And then, my insulin's level are way lower than they used to be before, and so on and so forth. And thinking through important decisions with that mental model gives me like clarity on, is that actually good or should I avoid that? The next thing is half-life of decisions. So prefer choices that last for years or pay dividends over time, or ones that expire in hours. So give you an example, learning sales skills that's useful for decades versus buying a trendy gadget. So you think about what's right now a big investment I could do that will pay dividends through my entire life. So half-life decisions. Right now, hard effort, but it can help me through my entire life. And sometimes it's not maybe just one thing and then you have it. Like working out, for instance, you can do throughout your entire life and it can pay dividends throughout your entire life. It's not a one-time investment, but it can also help. But the main thing is just you prefer choices. If you do a big decision today and it can pay dividends over many, many years, it can be a very good decision, especially if it's improving your life, helping your career or your business. The next one is input-output symmetry. So you want to look for small inputs with large outputs. So you want to avoid big inputs with small returns. And that's the core principle of leverage. How do I define leverage? Define leverage like, as Alex Hormozi does it, what you get out for what you put in. So you want to get out as much as possible while putting in as little as possible. So, to drive it home, reading one great book can give you ideas worth millions, whereas binge watching a Netflix series gives you nothing lasting, or not much. So with some exceptions perhaps. But that's the point. You want to put in as little as possible and get a lot of return. And the last mental model I want to share is risk and ease of undo. So you favor bets with a big upside, limited downside, and easy reversibility. Now that sounds a little bit amorphous or vague. I want to quote here Jeff Bezos. Alex Hormozi quoted him in his book $100 Million Offers, and Jeff wrote, I think in one of his shareholder letters, he wrote this. Outsized returns often come from betting against conventional wisdom, and conventional wisdom is usually right. Given a 10% chance of 100 times payoff, you should take that bet every time. but you're still going to be wrong 9 times out of 10. We all know that if you swing for the fences, you're going to strike out a lot, but you're also going to hit some home runs. The difference between baseball and business, however, is that baseball has a truncated outcome distribution. When you swing, no matter how well you connect with the ball, the most runs you can get is 4. In business, every once in a while, you step up to the plate, you can score 1,000 runs. This long-tailed distribution of returns is why it's important to be bold. Big winners pay for so many experiments. Jeff Bezos. So the main point is here, people who take the risk and take maybe many risks, at one point, perhaps they will get a very, very, very big return. And it can also be relevant on a micro level. Testing a small $100 ad campaign before spending $10K. But you iterate, you make many experiments, and you make the product or whatever you're doing better. It's like when I started my first, not my first, but I started a coaching business. I started out with an MVP, a minimum viable product, which is the first version of the product I sold. And it sucked, although I put in a lot of effort, but it was way too much content. I wanted to over-deliver my clients like crazy, but then I overwhelmed them. So the second version of my program, I incorporated all the feedback I got from my clients, and I realized what they actually value is less content, more accountability, and more the community aspect. Because in coaching, you usually have a community, you have coaching calls, group coaching calls, one-on-one calls, and you have videos to watch. But I realized that accountability and community is very important, and I dialed back when it comes to the videos. So I iterated and made an experiment. But the point is, you risk something, and maybe you will get a big return. So risk and ease of undo. Favor bets with a big upside, limited downside, and easy reversibility. Because and people will say, okay, like, I can lose everything if I start maybe a business or something, and fair enough. But how does it actually turn out, like, especially if you have nothing to lose, you have no children, no family, no spouse. If you really have no money, you still can maybe sleep at a friend's house or at your family's house, wherever. And you will work in a shitty job maybe, but you will not be homeless. That's at least what I think to be true, at least in Switzerland. So all this to say that you want to apply mental models. That's a third part to it. And when you combine reduced decision load, the first part I mentioned, then you think critically. And lastly, you have solid mental models. You give yourself the best chance of making choices that move you toward the life you want. All right, so we covered those 3 parts. Now, I want to give you a 4-step decision-making framework that helps you more on a micro level. Now we talk more about the big pictures, decluttering our lives, thinking critically, mental models, all good. But how can I make today a better decision or tomorrow? Listen. Strong emotions often push people into rush decisions, and mistakes love rush decisions. Now, here's I slow down and decide better on a micro level, on a day-to-day basis. And a framework, I want to share the framework I learned from entrepreneur Alex Hormozi, which is from an old podcast episode on his podcast, The Game. I can highly recommend listening to that, whether you're a business owner or someone just ambitious in life in general. And the first part to his framework to come up with a good decision is good night's sleep. So if you wake up well rested, which you should if you sleep 8 hours and you haven't eaten right before going to sleep, you're well rested, you think clearer. Because a tired brain is impatient and reactive and more impulsive. So you sleep first and decide after. And those days where you feel like you could conquer the world, those are very good days to make a good decision, at least sometimes. So first is good sleep. The second thing is you're well fed. Hunger if you're hungry, lowers patience, or it can lower patience and increases stress. It's not a general statement, but I realize that if I'm fasted versus if I'm not fasted, I feel a little bit more, let's say, I feel better when I'm fasted actually, but more calm when I ate, perhaps. I'm not sure if I actually think that. It depends, but I'm a little bit sometimes jittery when I'm fasted, when I get into a stressful situation. So I want to eat to make a good decision. But you need to figure out that for yourself. But well fed, yeah, that's the main point. And I like eating a protein-heavy meal. And then maybe I'll make a better decision. Third one is you change the environment. Physical spaces have emotional anchors. And if you're too attached to your current setting, switch it up, go to a cafe, take a walk, work from a new place. So if you're constantly working at one place or you're in the four walls, in your apartment, in your office, sometimes changing the environment gives you a little bit different inputs and in order to come with a good decision. And the last thing is you decide from abundance. And I think that's the most important part. And I think it was Donald J. Trump in The Art of Deal, and I'm paraphrasing, and I think that's not the exact quote, but he said something like, you can't negotiate if you're not willing to walk away. Personally, knowing I can walk away from almost anything in life helps me think more clearly in the moment. So, because if you know you can walk away of something, it removes pressure and you realize, do I actually need this deal or this decision at all? Or I just can say, no, I don't need that. I'm already good. It's already good as is. So it removes pressure. It lets me decide and act from a place of abundance. That's the core thing. Deciding from a place of abundance. You have everything. You don't need that decision. I don't need this. I don't need this person, whatever. So just knowing I have that option gives me peace, at least most of the time. So what I'm saying is, be content with what you already have. When you don't need the outcome, you can focus purely on facts and logic. Whether it's a decision you need to make or something you want, but then realize, oh, I don't need that. I don't need a second house, for instance, or I don't need that friend in my life. Whatever it might be, you decide from abundance. And again, this quote, or paraphrase quote, you can't negotiate if you are not willing to walk away from Trump. I think that's a great one. All right, now the takeaways from this episode. So, or maybe quickly recap this 4-step framework before we wrap things up. So first, you want to have good sleep. You're well fed. Third, change your environment. And lastly, you decide from abundance. So now we can wrap up things. So for big decisions, set yourself up with rest, food, and fresh environment and the mindset of abundance. And you will remove emotional pressure and drastically increase the odds of a rational choice. That's already what we know. So your life is built on one decision at a time. You want to reduce the noise. Declutter your life. Think for yourself. Make your own analysis. And use the best thinking tools you can find. So mental models. And remember, the quality of your future depends on the quality of the decisions you make today. All right, guys. That's it for today. Now you know what a decision is and how you can make good decisions short-term, mid-term, and long-term wise. And as a thank you for tuning in, I spent 4 months putting together a list of over 100 podcast episodes everyone should listen to before they die. All from other shows, not mine. And inside this list, you will find my top 10 all-time favorites, plus the best episodes I've ever found on wealth, health, relationships, and productivity. So just click the link below to download the list for free. And when you do, you will also be signed up for my newsletter so we can keep learning together. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Bye.